one second before we get started. Okay, got him. Anyone get the joke? Yeah. How many have been following the Pokemon Go cultural phenomenon that's taken over America? Yeah, so a few of you. Now, honesty call. How many have been playing? Just a few of us. Real honesty call. How many people have actually caught one at this conference? Yeah, a few. So there we go. Last weekend, I called my mom. We were debriefing on my cousin's wedding. You know, what did she wear? What did he say? And she brought up the fact that she's been playing Pokemon Go, and I thought, gee, that's interesting. You know, my mom's a 65-year-old retired teacher who, of her own volition, downloaded an app, went to YouTube, watched how-to videos, and mind you, spent real money, $20, buying virtual goods in the game to advance. She's a level 15, she tells me this morning, and I'm 16. So, I mean, it was a little bit of an aha moment for me that here my mother had identified with this theme. Why I'm here, well, first, my name is William Johnson. For 2 years, I worked for Google in London as an industry analyst in the gaming and the movie vertical. So forgive me if I still geek out about games. I can try and pretend to tell you that it's professional interest, that it's related to the idea that this is the biggest cultural phenomenon in augmented reality, to hit our generation. But really, it's just I'm a gaming geek as well. I'm no longer at Google. I now work at VigLink as the COO. I joined Oliver 4 years ago because I bought his mission about driving value and creating a first-of-a-kind exchange between publishers with influence and the brands that they know and love. We're going to cover the trends in 2016 as I see them. But you know, my mom had an interesting point about that game. In reflecting on her level 15 nature, she said, "It's just not that fun. I don't get it." So my mom is not a gaming geek, but did at least identify with Zelda, the original Zelda on Nintendo Entertainment System. I see a few head nods. See, she compared the two. She said the one has a princess. It's got a goal. It's a puzzle. I need to do things. I need to find things. I need to advance in the game. It's fun. It's engaging. I have to be creative. This Pokemon, yeah, it's addictive, but I don't get it. And I think that comment spoke to me about the essence of gaming. If you strip away all the noise about why this game is popular or that game is popular, why one thing succeeds or another or fails, I think it comes back to stripping away that noise and focusing on, at their core, games should be entertaining. They should delight us. And if there's no overarching goal, then that creative time is maybe wasted. And so my prediction in the gaming vertical is that this time next year, we will have forgotten about Pokemon Go. VigLink, if you're unfamiliar, is a software provider to publishers. We provide tools that I like to think of make this whole ecosystem a little bit simpler. We work with over 2 million sites and apps, and in the course of the last 4 years, I've spent a lot of time thinking about where is publishing going? What are we working on? How do we continue to drive value to our partners, both publisher and advertiser? I'm going to cover 3 things in the staying ahead of the trends today. The first is a rise in ad blocking. The second, a rise in distributed publishing. The third would be a new model of advertising revenue. I'm happy to take questions. We'll have about 10 minutes at the end, but I'm going to run through, and so please save your questions. It's interesting to start with 2 arguably display-oriented technologies, the rise in ad blocking and the rise in distributed publishing, and maybe some of you are thinking, how does that relate to the affiliate industry? By the end of the talk, I think you'll really identify with the themes that we're talking about here, the challenges created for the publisher, and the opportunities that exist for our industry. So in the first case, the rise of ad blocker, quick question again, how many people actually use an ad blocker in this audience? That's about right. It's actually 4 in an audience of, I don't know, call it 100. The US average, 2.2%. Seems pretty niche, right? Why does this matter? It certainly doesn't pass my mom test. My mom doesn't know that she hasn't, what an ad blocker is, nor does she know that she should use one. And by the way, guys, shame on you. All of our salaries are paid by advertising. So, but actually, that's not true. So this year, iOS shipped a new version of Safari, which has built in an ad blocker. How many of you guys have iPhones? I'd expect it to be more than half of the audience. And in fact, all of you have an ad blocker on your phone. If you scroll up to the top of an article you read on Safari and you hit that little line with those 3 lines, you'll see a completely unadvertised version of the page you're reading. The other reason that this is actually not the case, that it's not niche in the US, is because even though VigLink works with a world of publishers, the ones that are primarily US focused, even they tend to have more than half of their readership overseas. And overseas, ad blocking is the norm. So Asia Pac has 35% of the population uses an ad blocker. In India, it's 2/3. That means that in the rest of the world where you have influence, your readers are using ad blockers. In fact, if you read around the web and what publishers are saying, they talk about it in crisis proportions. Lose your spot. In fact, pretty much every chief revenue officer of a major publisher out there has an opinion about ad blockers and what they're doing to solve it. Some of you might have noticed, you've gone to a website recently and they've noticed, well, some of you 4, you've noticed that they call out that you're using an ad blocker and ask you please not to. They make an appeal to your emotion. They say, this is how we pay for our business. But indeed, I think the best example of why this matters is that, I think it was summed up by Steve Carbone at Mediacom. He said, it's our fault. It's the advertising industry's fault. We created this terrible user experience, and as a result, users are voting us off the island. So what you're seeing with this rise in ad blocking is that the major revenue stream for most publishers, indeed more than 90% for the big ones, comes from display advertising. They're having this erosion in a significant portion of their user base. So the dollars that they can count on from display ad revenue are quickly being eroded, and they're having to think about creative ways to answer, well, what am I going to do in a future that might have 100% penetration of ad blocking? I think the second important theme to stay on top of is the idea that publishing is quickly becoming distributed. So I want to share some stats and a story from an article written last year, Wall Street Journal. The stat was, in 2014, Facebook actually overtook Google as the primary referrer for their news-related traffic. So what that means is 2014, December 2014, big news publications got more traffic from Facebook than they did from Google. In fact, overall, it accounted for more than 25% of their referral traffic, and that's across 300 big sites that we've all heard of. More than a quarter of their traffic came from Facebook. In May, the reason for the article, overnight the traffic dropped to 0. People were freaking out. I mean, imagine if you write content, imagine if a quarter of your users disappeared overnight. If you sell a product, imagine if a quarter of your audience stopped coming. Notably, it was an emergency state. They got on the phone, they sorted it out. It was actually just a bug. Oops, our bad. But what it highlighted, and this is the point of the article, is how reliant these publishers have become on properties that they don't own. In the past, for much of this industry, it's been on Google. We've had a heavy dependence on Google for our traffic. In fact, Google is engaging in shopping experiences. They're taking product listing ads in increasing volumes, and brands have to show up there with their products and pay premiums. Also, publishers have to compete in SEO and in SEM to get traffic back to their own sites. And now, we're dealing in a world where a quarter of it comes from social. News is discovered and shared on social. So there's a lot of concern. Has anyone experienced Facebook Instant? Are you familiar with this theme that I'm talking about? The little lightning bolt next to an article that appears on Facebook. I see one or two head nods. If you're not familiar, Facebook Instant is now a speed trade-off. It means that when I'm on Facebook and a friend shares an article and there's a lightning bolt right there, I can click on it and the full article is right there for me on Facebook. I don't have to leave and go to a different site. I don't have to disrupt my experience, and in fact, I can share it again. I'm more inclined to share it, is Facebook's point, because it's a seamless user experience with a zero load time. And this is great. I mean, it's better for me as a reader. I can focus on the articles that matter, and I can reshare them easily. And this is Facebook's entire point to publishers, but notably, this example, the story about readership dropping to zero overnight from Facebook, illustrates a little bit of the tension. See why, if I run a brand, should I give up to Facebook all of the control? Why should I, if 90% of my revenue comes from my ad sales and the bulk of that from my direct sold efforts, why should I hand that off to Facebook? They're going to share 70% of revenue with me, but will that change? And so there's an interesting dialogue going on around the editorial space by authors about this frenemy relationship between Facebook and between their own publication. My sense is you got to play. The world is moving towards these portals as important access to readers. And if you aren't thinking about getting your content in front of them, whether it be Snapchat Engage or publishing on Twitter, whether you're thinking about publishing on Facebook, you're going to fall behind. But the publisher needs to reconcile the idea that that reader might not be coming back to you. That indeed you might be giving up your ad sales revenue to someone that doesn't have your interests in mind. And so this creates a challenge in that influencers need to think about the value of their influence, irrespective of their ability to sell ads alongside their pages. I thought John Potter, the CTO at Perch, had a really good quote. He said, "It's more an ally than a threat. You better engage. But it will be a threat if it becomes too reliant, if you depend on it too much as a source of revenue or traffic." This is Facebook Instant. At VigLink, we're often talking to publishers of all shapes and sizes. We had a group of 20 folks from Vogue come in and talk to us about how they're thinking about the future of the brand. And one of the most interesting things I took away from that, because Vogue is a well-known brand who has an incredibly well-distributed print media that catalog business or magazine business. But the most important thing I took away from that meeting was the mention that Vogue today, is trying to imagine a world in which they never see another reader come back to Vogue.com, where their entire brand exists off of Vogue.com. And they're preparing for that world. They're preparing to engage on portals where their readers are or the readers will be. I think that's an interesting model of influence in that if you write content, you have readers many places, many countries, many portals. They find out about you in many ways. If you sell products, people discover you through a variety of these influencers. They will discover you through a variety of channels. It is important that the publishers themselves think about how they have influence and what that influence is worth to them. And advertisers seek out and answer, how do I engage most meaningfully with those who have influence? Which leads me on to my last theme, the third of three, rather than the two fears about threats to display, which make up a significant portion of the business model of the publisher of today. It's actually a note of promise, of hopefulness, because I believe a better model exists, and that's why we're all here. See, when the quote, sorry, I didn't back up a second. When we talked about ad blocking, there are estimates from Adobe that rank the drop in lost ad revenue this year from ad blocking between 20 and 40 billion, which is, for context, between 5 and 10x the total market cap of what we spend our time on. We hear influencers, brands, connecting at Affiliate Summit East are valued at between 4 and 6 billion, and the loss from display advertising revenues is between 20 and 40. So there's been, the third point is how to do this well. And there have been a number of tremendous examples of what it means to be a valued influencer. I think a lot of people, and this resonates with me because I went kayaking last weekend, and in order to kayak, I needed a headlamp. It was a night kayaking trip. And so in order to decide which one to buy, I went to the wire cutter. And they recommended one that was 2.5 times as expensive as the one I thought to buy, recommended by Amazon, but I bought it because they said it was the best. And a lot of publishers are taking note of this success by Wirecutter, someone who was excluded from the success of display. They never had this great direct ad sales team. They focused instead on long-form content that people came and read the whole way through, that unabashedly recommended products, that said, you should buy this because we think it's the best. And every now and then, particularly in the last 6 months, we come across a director of digital, a director of commerce at one of these big publishers, as they too seek to mirror this example of success, where they're thinking first and foremost, how do I forget about the display ad, the major banner that we sell alongside our articles, and instead think about the power of our influence? How do we connect to our reader? How do we tell them something valuable? One example would be Rodale. I mean, they run Men's Health and Women's Health, bicycling.com, Runner's World. If you're a workout enthusiast, you've probably picked up an issue of Men's Health or Women's Health in your time. They sell a ton of direct sold ads that they do incredibly well. Most of their ads are entertaining in nature. I mean, that is one dominant theme about the core of why we write, is that it should be entertaining. And so they teach us salacious tips, things to try with our partner, and they sell incredible amounts of ads alongside those to aspire. But notably, they're investing heavily in commerce. They're investing in having an opinion, in taking a stance on what to buy, and then on distributing that voice across their social channels, no longer using Facebook just as a way to drive someone back to menshealth.com, but instead to take a stance on that forum to say, we think, and this is true, and this is funny, because I was walking through New York 2 weeks ago with our CEO, and he said, gosh, it's hot here, and I'm wearing funny shoes. What shoes should a man wear with shorts? How do I look fashionable in shorts? I gave him my opinion, but then I went home and looked at it, and sure enough, first page results for me was an article by Rodale. And I got really interested in that. This is great. This is helpful. A reader has written in and said, what shoes should I buy if I'm wearing shorts and I want to look fashionable? And as I went back and looked at the analytics that we provide to that publisher, sure enough, if you rank their pages based on revenue per 1,000 page views, revenue per 1,000 page views, a great number, if you told me you were going to sell me an ad, would be $10 RPM, I'll take that. I'll put that out on every page of my publication. This article about which shoes should I wear with shorts has a $55 RPM. Readers are buying. Readers are buying because Rodale, Men's Health, they have something to say. And this has become a real revenue stream for them, and I think it's an important lesson to take away. Ultimately, I joined VigLink 4 years ago because while I was at Google, I was trying to buy a scooter. Couldn't figure out which one to buy. I thought I'd jump in market with something that looked pretty well rated. All of the reviews on the retailer said it was great. A bunch of articles I found in my Google searches for which one should I buy were fantastic. I think I ended up on a forum that had a bunch of horror stories about people who had bought this Chinese scooter. I don't know, a bunch of fake content had been published and distributed around the web. And it was only when I read these people's horror stories about flat packs arriving and the scooter being in pieces that I thought, God, thank God, I'm ready to buy what they recommend. It was this, I don't even remember because somebody lit it on fire in London. But it was then that I identified that there must be a better way. There must be a better way. There must be something that connects the influencer. It better aligns the author with the brand that's being talked about. Because I spent more on that scooter than I originally set out to spend. And so I bought into the vision that Oliver had sold me about a better marketplace, building something that connects influencers with the brands that they love and want to promote. I think it's important as we talk about what's ahead in affiliate, we've discussed that the display is in duress because of, on the one hand, the rise in ad blockers. On the second, because publishers themselves increasingly face challenges when they're trying to sell their own display, and in order to get in front of their readers wherever they are, need to distribute on sites that they don't own. And the third would be examples of real success within publishers who are starting to think about commerce first as a revenue stream. I think the first two, the challenges of display and the eroding in the classic revenue stream of publishers should be incredibly exciting to this forum, who come together once or twice a year to talk about, well, how do we write to drive sales? How do we have a voice? How do we get in front of the people who trust us, with whom we have influence? And ultimately, how do we together build a better model of the influencer and the brand that's looking to drive sales? If you write content, I hope that a couple of themes are clear to you. I hope you think about what's your voice, you think about having something to say and saying it. Because if the core of gaming is to entertain, and my mom is ready to abandon Pokemon Go if it will be dead in a year, as I predict, I would argue that the core of publishing, if you're a publisher, is being entertaining. Yeah, sure, have something to say that people like to read, but be authentic, have something to say. Teach people something they want to learn. And if you're a brand, if you're buying traffic in this model, then it's worth thinking about, how do I allocate budget as a marketer? Where do I put my bets that have the best hope in driving long-term sustainable revenue for both of us, for this ecosystem in which people who have an opinion want to engage with brands that they love? I think that's ultimately the point I want you guys to walk away with, is that these trends that are threats to the business model of the past are tremendous opportunities for us. If you're not aware of Facebook Instant Articles, if you're not aware of Snapchat Discover, educate yourself and think about how to get to your readers that are there. If you haven't been thinking about ad blocking, it's probably time to think about how many of your readers are overseas and what percent install do you have? Do you have a strategy as it relates to the potential erosion of your display dollars? And if you're writing, if you're an influencer, you should think about taking a bet on what you have to say. That's the bulk of what I have prepared for you guys today. I'm happy to take questions if there are any in the crowd. Rodale. Rodale is a brand. They own about 15 publications, Men's Health and Women's Health. Rodale. Yeah.
What's your thoughts on native ads and video?
So a couple of thoughts. Native, made most popular by Facebook's sponsored posts or Twitter sponsored posts, have worked incredibly well because they look like content, right? And I think Facebook's able to monetize much better because they have this format that really performs. Two things to keep note of, though. Ad blockers will actually block native content, depending on the configuration of the publisher. So if you engage with a few of these, ultimately, if you're serving something on your page that is JavaScript that didn't belong there before, native ad units are still at risk of being blocked. And secondly, I've thought of native ads as lipstick on a pig. I mean, forgive the analogy, but it's still an advertisement. And while it's helpful because it's likely to trick the user into clicking on something they thought was content, I think people learn their behavior over time and ultimately abandon. I mean, right now, if you open your Facebook feed, the chances are that you'll see some significant percentage on the first page of your posts that are put there in order for you to read them, paid for by an advertiser. But there's an equilibrium there. If it gets to be 40, 50, 60%, I think you'll stop looking at your newsfeed as a valuable source of content. Great question. At the back? I'm sorry, you'll have to repeat it one more time just because it's a little bit hard to hear and I didn't quite follow.
So, since all the growth of social, at least in the context of Facebook, there's been sort of steady consolidation, the same type of consolidation that we saw in the PC market, same type of consolidation that we saw in the storage market. This is the consolidation of content. In social marketing, we're breaking people off from the days of the early 2000s when we, tried to forge the best content under our own domains, and that was the asset we were selling. We're moving quickly away from that. We're moving to seeing a branded value where your opinion or your input is the most valuable from multiple networks, and you're no longer concerned about that big, you're more concerned about your followers and so forth. So why even try to fight the actual movement of people blocking ads or any other means to start saying there's how we have to start making this shift and realize that the actual values are authenticity and our direct connection to our users.
So thank you. Excellently put, actually. I think that's highly consistent with the theme. And if you didn't hear, the point was there's been a tremendous, conceding that there's been a tremendous concentration of content on social portals. Let's just acknowledge that that's happening and instead invest in our voice and our brand. Did I accurately represent your? And I think.
Obviously, there's different models for product advertising. You see some content, the New York Times alluded to a subscription model, free articles and stuff like that. And it's all like a dollar slowly fighting. So to me, it seems like the last 5 years, it's already been all the bell has already been rung, and we need to start pushing that out.
And I think that would be my point, is especially if indeed you're going to concede the idea that you are a brand with a voice and a lot of the readership will happen off of your platform, you better invest in having something to say. I mean, that is what this industry is about. It is about rewarding those who can drive us sales, if you're a brand, or having enough influence to drive sales to a brand. So I take your point. I think it's intelligent and largely consistent with my view of the world. I think influencers should focus on those brands and build influence wherever they have a following. Think about driving sales from whatever platform you have a following. Write with an intent to drive sales in a place where you don't control the display advertising revenue and own your perspective. Yeah, that's a great question.
Are they only blocking the display ads? I mean, they can't block the affiliate links in your content.
No, they can't. In fact, that's a great question. We at VigLink had a major panic moment when we noticed traffic dropped 30% across a couple of browsers one day 3 years ago, and immediately got on the phone, spent our data science team's time trying to figure out and isolate the problem, and isolated it to a few browsers who had a high concentration of installs of ad blockers. And we were tremendously humbled that our publishers also noticed this happening and wrote in on our behalf to say, no, this is my voice. These affiliate links that I put in my page are mine, are my readers. And this is not a model that you're allowed to block. And indeed, AdBlock Plus, we are one of their preferred partners without paying on the whitelist. Your question being, ultimately, you're making a decision to insert an affiliate link one of two ways. You've decided to take it out of a network and hard-code it into a page. That link is currently unblocked. But there's another way to do it. VigLink offers a JavaScript that will do that automatically for the 50,000 plus advertisers that we work with. And in that model as well, those links still affiliate and earn you revenue. Yeah. Great question. Question here?
You referenced the Adobe study of 40 to 60 billion lost by ad blockers compared to an estimated 4 to 6 billion in affiliate commissions and payouts. Do you think that inherently means the traditional display world has
It's a good question. It's 20 to 40, by the way, so it wasn't quite 10x across but it's 20 to 40 billion. I think when you're thinking about trends, at least the way that I've thought about trends is there are ways to make money in any market, up and down, short term, long term. But over the long term, if we're talking really about trends, we're talking both about things that are happening now and things that we expect to happen over the long run. I think we've seen a lot of display exploitation, to be honest. I think the way to maximize your display revenue is to create a bunch of slideshows and drum up every visitor into 5, 10, 15 pages, and therefore that is how you've classically driven up your display ad revenue. And I think that results in a lot of content that is slideshow in nature and isn't necessarily aligned with that idea of having something to say, something authentic to say. And what I'm saying is, instead of attributing the shift in dollars and an erosion of what it's actually worth, no, I think those shoppers could be served real display ads. They could, in fact, be in market for a particular thing. But I would argue, actually, the budget allocation has been toward display at the forsaking performance. And I think ultimately over the long term, as I say, the latter, performance, at least incentivizes both sides of the marketplace the right way, rather than incentivizing slideshow content that drives up a tremendous amount of page view to maximize your display dollars. So thanks very much. That's the time that we have allotted. I'm happy to talk afterwards if there are questions. Again, my name is William Johnson, COO at VigLink, and thanks very much for giving me 30 minutes of your time.